more than 100 unique styles of beer, each with their own set of ingredients, process, guidelines, history, and experience. If you're a beer lover, an industry leader, or somewhere in between, a better knowledge of beer style will improve your life and your work.
Welcome to A Sense of Beer Style, essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. I'm Julia Herz.
And I'm Jeremy Storton.
We're advanced Cicerones, beer judges, home brewers, and we're excited to guide you through the vast and wonderful world of beer styles.
Well, hi, Julia. Welcome back, everyone.
Hey.
Beer Stylecast. Yeah. Today's going to be a little fun because I'm just going to admit out of the gate that today we're talking about American Stout, and I'm going to admit this is not the first beer that I'm going to put in my hand. It has flavors that we're going to talk about in a minute that I don't normally gravitate toward. I like this beer, but it's got to be the right time, got to be the right place. Or even more importantly, it's got to be the right pairing for this beer to be a hell yeah for me. When we talk about its ancestry of the stout, of course, we go back to the 1700s and before, where in England, where the working class, it carried all your luggage to and from, and thank you, sir, thank you, ma'am, and they brewed a dark beer called a porter, named after the workers. And then, let's make it stronger. So then it was a stout porter. Then they separated those out, and there's porters and stouts. And somewhere around probably the 60s, we Americans traveled through Europe with backpacks and on our backs, and we thought, wow, this beer is great. It has color, it has flavor. I wonder if we could brew this at home. And so we did. We brought the porter back home. We brought the stout back home, and we brewed our versions with our ingredients. And now we have the American Stout. And so today we get to dive into this wonderful style.
It's a great style, and it is one that it has almost like a divisive nature because you do have to be in the mood for a stout, even though you know how many American IPAs are enjoyed with the same alcohol volume of 5 to 7%. Stouts, American stouts, are not that big in alcohol compared to most wines you might drink. It's just that dark, roasted, more bitter nature that I think is where it needs the right moment in time. But this is a style that many of the original craft brewers had. Sierra Nevada out of the gates had a stout. I believe Anchor Steam certainly had a stout. You have stouts on the homebrewer side that you said. So yeah, it's a strong kind of more roasted, more bitter forward, dark ale. But man, are they good.
And some people just love that dark, roasty flavor. I think about people who love French roast coffee, where, some people say, "Ooh, it's dark roasty." If you ask other people, they say it's burnt. But there's a flavor there that is very polarizing. You either love it, you hate it, and maybe there's a few of us in between. I put myself in between. But let's talk about the ingredients, Julia, before I head on to pouring my beer and talking about appearance.
Yeah, because once you're drinking it, you're probably going to be like, why am I not drinking this all the time? So, Jeremy will put us in the mood by pouring his beer, and we're talking about the beer judge certification program guidelines, American Porter and Stout category, and we are talking American Stout as the actual style. That is now what's in Jeremy's glass that looks beautiful. But characteristics, ingredients that get you to the flavor and the appearance and really what the beer is made of is just your classic American base pale malts, right? This is not a complex style to brew, but it's got so much complexity. So American base malts, ale yeast, and American hops, right? The dark and roasted malts are really where you get higher roasted versus lower kiln temperature malts that really are the game changer, that give you more phenols and that kind of those tannins, that give you some of that that more almost to acrid and beyond dark chocolate types of flavors. And then some caramel malts are snuck in there too to give it some complexity. People that are brewing it on the homebrew level or the brewery level can use adjuncts to give it either more complexity, more fermentable sugars, and or color. There's a lot of ways you can get some darker color that are snuck in from some adjuncts or additives. But it's a very straightforward beer to brew. They really are.
Yeah. And I've brewed a couple versions of this before with my own little twist on it, and it came out fine. And And I'm sure all of us listening, all of us watching, and certainly you've tasted some, Julia, that have been a little bit on the darker, roasted, burnt, even harsh side, and that's one side of the spectrum. And then there are some that are just very smooth and just soft in their approach. They have a little bit of a prickle in the flavor, but it's not going to poke the bear in the nose type of thing, you know. Um, so when I pour this beer, if you are watching, you can see this. If you're not watching, then I'll describe it to you. When I first poured it a couple minutes ago, the foam kind of formed really easily, and it persisted for probably a good minute or so. That's a pretty good persistence for foam, and the foam comes across as almost like a darker tan color. I love using the word camel because I think about like khaki pants. There's different shades of khaki pants. No pleats necessary. We're talking kind of like a dark desert camel. There's a little bit of color to this neutral color, if that makes any sense. But when I look at this, if I hold this up to the light, it can be dark brown. It can be just jet black. If you have a thin glass or hold it at the light just right, you might even see some like little red hues in there too. That's perfectly fine. When we're trying to assess clarity of this beer, that's really hard. We need a very, very thin glass to tell if it's clear or not. Basically, it is so dark that we're not going to see through it, whether it's hazy or clear. So we just call it opaque. If you want to do some more thorough research on your particular beer, it probably is clear, but you have to use a good glass or a thin glass to really to show that. This, like I just mentioned, the head, it can persist. It should come out really well and persist for a little while. But that's really what I'm looking at for this beer. It's just dark, it's inviting, and it's perfect for a brooding day. How about the aroma?
The aroma is gonna lead with the malt, right? Those specialty roasted, higher roasted temperature malts is what I referred to in the ingredients. Moderate to strong roast aromas, what the style guidelines allow for. And that roasted coffee or dark chocolate quality, you can go to burnt or charcoal. The style guidelines allow for that, but they would be low levels. If it goes too burnt, too charcoal, and I really like that descriptor, you don't want it to go to ashy, right? You don't want it to be acrid. And then the American hops. I mean, this is an American stout, so of course it's going to have hop aroma and flavor, not just bitterness. So medium to low hop aroma, but at least hop aroma present. And those American style hops of the forest or the tropics, those are the notes that you're looking for. And then, the esters from the ale yeast are not going to easily get their way past those roasted malt notes, but you might get some fruity esters in a low level, but it's definitely optional. And then that light ethanol, because it's a 5 to 7% alcohol beer. So you're not going to get a big punch of alcohol, but you will maybe get a little prickle to the nose when you're smelling it
Yeah.
from the alcohol. It's kind of a reaction. And then you just never want it that burnt or sharp or acrid. But the aroma is very inviting. And I think the visual appearance is very inviting. And now the best part that's most inviting is the flavor. So take us through that.
Absolutely. When I taste this beer, when I taste a good version of this beer, which I have a very good version of this beer, it reminds me of pizza, where you pull pizza out of the oven and there's that one big bubble that's been blackened because it was closer to the heat source. And when you take a bite of that crust, you get this wonderful flavor of pizza, but there's just a little bit of that black crust that's on there, and it just gives a not quite shocking jolt of flavor, but a surprising jolt of flavor. And, I think, did I like that? Did I not? Either way, I'm still thinking about it. This kind of what this beer is for me is you have this medium to very high roasted malt quality that can manifest in dark coffee. But, as Julia, since you and I are advanced Cicerones, I can't just sit at coffee. To me, I think of like a dark espresso as opposed to that pot of coffee in the diner that's been sitting on the burner for 2 hours. Be specific about what kind of coffee this is. I think about a dark, semi-sweet chocolate with like a 70%, 80% cacao, where it's, we're not going to just, eat these all day long on an Easter, there's a little bit of bitterness to them. A little bit of burnt flavor, like Julia mentioned in the aroma, that is okay. You can have a little bit. That's why we love this beer, because it does have that that dark kind of burnt flavor to it. Some of these low to medium malt flavors come across as just sweetness, a rich chocolate, and we mentioned the type of chocolate, a little bit of dark caramel. You can have low esters if at all. They don't have to be there. This beer right now, as I smell it and taste it, I get a hint of slightly burnt banana bread. I get this just wonderful ester coming out through there. The bitterness is going to be medium to high because this is an American stout, so we're getting a lot of hops in there. Plus, we're getting some bitterness coming from those roasted grains, so that's going to add to that flavor.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, but the type of hops, if American Stout, most likely we're going to use American hops. So we're looking at a low to high. What a range that is, low to high. They definitely covered the ground there. But every stout is different. But a low to high. But we're looking mostly for citrus, resin, American style hops. Doesn't have to be there, but it usually is. As far as the finish, when I think about flavors like a boat, and the finish is the wake after the boat has gone by. What's lingering on your palate after you're done swallowing and tasting? We've got a medium dry finish. There, it's not very sweet. It's kind of balanced out toward the hops, toward the roast, with a little bit of that low burnt flavor coming through. And then you, Julia, you mentioned the alcohol. Doesn't have to be there. Usually is a low to medium, very smooth, inviting alcohol warming that for me usually manifests in almost like a peppermint. So when you taste this, think about how the flavors manifest, taste it again, think about how it feels, think about everything that's coming through. There's a lot of complexity there. There's a lot to think about in this beer. But I'll save that. I think we covered most of that for flavor. Let's talk about mouthfeel, because that's the other third leg of this three-legged stool.
Yeah, and let's take a moment real quick. I mean, flavor is a fusion of three things. It's aromatic compounds, it's basic taste, and it's mouthfeel. Jeremy is following style guidelines, taking you through the flavor, which means what you're tasting. And the style guidelines are a little wonky because they're not just talking basic taste. So Jeremy talks about that ethanol, right? And the alcohol should not be anything but kind of light or moderate, strong alcohol warmth. But that's listed in the style guidelines mouthfeel section. So I love that you covered that, because in your flavor overview, that's what you're getting as you drink it. But specifically, that alcohol ethanol warmth is going to show up as a flavor in the mouthfeel section. Mouthfeel is commonly talked about temperatures, textures, and pain. Right, and the pain could be capsaicin heat, or that
sensation, but okay,
that capsaicin heat, or that peppermint snap, right? That hit of menthol, or that ethanol hit. That's why Jeremy appropriately said that he was getting the ethanol in his flavor description, and yet it's part of mouthfeel. And the way that BJCP talks about it is medium, light to moderately strong alcohol warmth. And then on top of that, the body, right? That weight on the tongue and the soft palate is medium to full. That's not too big of a spectrum. I actually appreciate that, because otherwise the hops and aroma are so broad, and other things that Jeremy talked about, such a broad spectrum. Medium to full body, right? You do get some weight and girth to this beer, but it can be also going all the way to creamy, right? It's weighty enough and dense enough that it goes to creamy and silky and soft on your tongue as you drink it, and that's a beautiful thing. That bit of roast or driven astringency that I've talked about is there, but you don't want it to be overly aggressive. And you certainly are, I think, getting a cleansing effect and a drying, refreshing effect from the fact that this beer is low enough alcohol, less than 8%, to hold medium high to high carbonation. So the carbonation in the mouthfeel really helps dry out this beer and brings you that refreshment and makes you want to have a sip after sip. So I love good, complex, bigger style beers that hold good carbonation. I like them still too, but carbonation really is a great ingredient in beer and a big component of the mouthfeel.
Yeah, and everything that we described, it's when I think about the aroma, the taste, and the mouthfeel of all forming just collectively flavor. There's a lot of bleed over it, and I go back and forth with those two, and that's just one of those things, because and particularly with this beer, I think of this beer is it's both provocative and inviting at the same time, and maybe that's why we love it so much, because it's challenging and comfortable at the same time, and it's a weird paradox. So when we talk about the style comparison, what can we compare an American stout to? If we were to look at the extra stout or the export stout, this one is going to have a little bit more hop character. It's going to be a little bit more bitter, and it's probably going to have a little bit more roast as well. This one is just a little bit has more character and all that than the export stout. When we compare it to a black IPA, the black IPA is not going to be quite as well, it's going to be about as strong, but it's going to have a little bit more hop character because it's an IPA, so they're going to put that first. When we talk about an imperial stout, this one is not going to be as strong or as big in body and alcohol and impact. And I think the best comparison is we compare an American stout to a British stout. Well, we Americans love our hops. We want more roast character. We want more hop character. We want more bitterness. And the British ones are going to be a little bit more on the malt forward side compared to an American stout. So this is how I would define and differentiate these beer styles from each other that are very similar. But I urge you, if you're studying for a Cicerone test or a BJCP test or anything like that, taste these side by side and really, really get to know them intimately. But that's a style comparison. How about the commercial examples?
Yes, and if you're throwing commercial examples in the mix to try to calibrate, one way to differentiate, say, the American stout from the imperial style stout is it's going to have less collar of foam. It's going to have less carbonation. So visually, if you're testing against, you might have a good way to cheat and look for that difference because it's a fun one to look for. Yeah.
Good point.
Commercial examples are readily available. Thank goodness. This is not one of those styles where Jeremy and I have to say again and again, we wish we saw more of these because they're about as prolific as pretty much most microbrewery or brew pub tap rooms that you walk in. It's going to have an American stout often from the brewer on tap. The ones that are packaged and from regional brewers or national or international brewers in the U.S. particularly are very prolific because it is an American style. Bell's Kalamazoo Stout is one that really helped put the style on the map. Larry Bell, who started Bell's Brewing, really started as a home brewer, and he was one of the first commercial beers to get out there in this day. They have whole festivals dedicated to the Kalamazoo Stout for sure. On the West Coast, not the East Coast, Deschutes Obsidian Stout is a mainstay day in and day out. That is what Jeremy's drinking. If you're going to look for a reliable example, go to Bell's, go to Deschutes. Sierra Nevada also has a stout, which frankly I don't see as much as Deschutes or Bell's.
Yeah,
but
that's a good
pick
point.
it up. Pick it up, go for it. And then Avery Out of Bounds Stout helps set the tone as well. And then I haven't had Trillium Secret Stairs. I love seeing a Trillium on the list, but I haven't had it. And that's another good example of American Stout.
Yeah. When we talk about the vital stats, what you need to know about this. So I'm going to start with what Julia Aubrey mentioned. The ABV of this is from 5 to 7. So we are in the smack dab in the middle of what I consider to be average strength to slightly elevated 5 to 7 ABV. How that's going to translate to original gravity is, you're putting your hydrometer in the flask and we're getting 1050 to 1075. There's that correlation between original gravity and what we expect the ABV to be as long as everything attenuates properly. For those of you who speak Plato, we're looking at 12.5 to 18.5 Plato, right around there. That is all going to attenuate down and ferment down to a final gravity of 1010 to 1020. Now, keep in mind, 1010 is that fence for me, above which it's got some body and some character, below which it's just very light and dry. This one has some pretty firm a body left over to it and residual sugar left over to it. And that's as evidence when we talked about mouthfeel, we got a medium to full body. That's what we're looking for with that final gravity. For those who are looking for a final Plato, we're looking at 2.5 to 5.5, and that translates there. So that's kind of where the ABV and the gravities go. So the overall the alcohol by Plato, if you will, for those who again speak Plato, we're looking at 10 to 13. That's where we're going to drink this at. But that's the alcohol. That's the gravities. IBUs. This one is a hoot. Because this goes from the IBU range for this is anywhere from 35 IBUs all the way up to 75 IBUs. This could be lightly hoppy, or it could be excessively hoppy. The range there is just astounding. I find that absolutely interesting, and that's just for the American Stout. When we're looking at color, we mentioned is going to be dark brown to black. That puts us firmly in the 30 to 40 SRM, or standard reference method. If we're outside the US, we're looking at EBC. We could just effectively double that, and we're looking at 60 to 80. But remember, this is dark brown or black. Or as that Lego Batman says, I only work in black and sometimes really, really dark brown. That's kind of where this beer lies. That's it for the final stats. It's really important to understand what these numbers mean and know where this style fits in comparison to its beer styles. So that's why we talk about the vital stats. But let's talk more importantly about glass and temperature.
Yes, and glassware, again, this is a complex style and flavor, but not approach in brewing process or ingredients. And so the glassware to me is pretty straightforward. I would acceptably drink this Scandal in a pint glass, because I want some of that carbonation to volatilize out. It's okay if some of the flavors are dampened. That might lessen some of the bitterness and kind of mute some of that, more burnt flavor or acrid, higher roasted malt flavors. So I would accept it happily and drink it, joyfully in a pint glass. Or, you can up the game and go to more of a Nonic type of pint. And Jeremy's got, the perfect example in his hands right now, if you happen to be watching us. So that English pint glass, right? The imperial pint glass, your hand holds around it. You're going to get to more warmer temperatures. And sure, it's great. You're going to have this on tap, probably you're out of your fridge at 38 degrees Fahrenheit. And then you're going to, if it warms up, enjoy it all the way up to 45 degrees Fahrenheit or 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So, 7 to 10 Celsius. And so those temperatures are going to help it display more and be more aggressive in what is in the glass flavor wise. And so I like them cold. I like them as they warm up too.
Yeah, and this is a really fun thing to do, to really study and understand this beer, because I've done this with lots of different beers, almost every beer style in the list, but especially with this one, where you open it right out of the fridge, and you take a few sips and just let it sit. Just let it sit in your hand. Spend half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour drinking this thing, and just notice the differences as it changes temperature. I think that is a huge and wonderful education that you'll have to give yourself. But this one, we're going to talk about pairing. I did want to have just a quick a PSA, a public safety announcement. Whenever we talk about pairing, people love to talk about stouts and chocolate blah, blah, blah. It could be a chocolate mousse or chocolate cake or whatever. I want to urge you, everyone, be careful with this. The cancellation effect is very strong with this experience. It can go really well, or it can go south in a hurry, because remember, like cancels like, sweet cancels sweet. And if that actually happens with a stout like this and a chocolate mousse, chocolate cake, whatever it may be, you could end up with all the sweetness can be swept away, and you're left with everything but. So if you experience that, now you understand why. Try something different. Try something with cheesecake, or we talk about creme brulee often in the Stylecast. We must be in the mood for creme brulee, but this beer would be fantastic with creme brulee. I would love this with like a dry cheese, like a Parmesan or something like that, or like a steak that's just like medium rare. It's still got some sweetness and savory. This would be a great beer with that. But Julia, I got to share something with you and everyone else. I found, as a kid, I used to go to the Southern California desert and get date shakes, and I loved date shakes. It was basically vanilla ice cream with a bunch of dates and all blended up, and they were fabulous. Have you ever had one? They are fabulous. But one day I decided, okay, here's the stout that kind of challenges me in my pairing ability. I decided I'm going to get some pistachio ice cream, get this beer and some dates, and make a date shake with Obsidian Stout from Deschutes, pistachio ice cream. And it was pure heaven, because all that sweetness balanced out that roast and that bitterness, and that roast and bitterness balanced out all that sweetness, and it was pure heaven. So I urge everyone to try that.
Yummy. You got me distracted from what I was going to say I'd pair with, but I'll try to bring it back and bring it home. Go to coffee, right? Don't just go to chocolate, because darker chocolate going to more acrid flavors, go to coffee cake, right? Things with coffee
Oh
ice
yeah.
cream,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Coffee makes so much sense in some of the mix here. Also, too, in the main dishes, get a little wacky. Like I'm eliciting now in my mind as Jeremy's talking, Chinese food like beef with broccoli, right? And they often
Oh
have like this
yes.
brown base or like a hoisin sauce almost on the side. Stout's going to link and bridge with many things that have advanced heat flavor in that sauce or on that grilling method, whether it's vegetable or protein. So I'm going to Chinese food and sticking with beef with broccoli and having an American stout.
Oh man, that sounds amazing. I got to try that. As always, you astound me, Julia. That was wonderful. But for those of you who don't, who are not in love with American stouts, I don't believe there's such thing as a bad beer. I believe there's a misunderstood beer, and I think these pairings is how we can better understand these beers, whether it's with Chinese food or some pistachio ice cream and dates. This, for those of you who have yet to fall in love with the style, it's there. You just have to uh, reach across the aisle, so to speak, and just understand and appreciate what this beer has to offer. But that being said, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and cheers to you.
Cheers to you all. Be well and enjoy your American stout.
Thank you for listening to A Sense of Beer Style, the essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. With advanced Cicerones, me, Julia,
And me, Jeremy.
Tune into the next episode as we continue exploring the world of beer styles and what to make of them. We encourage you to listen to the prepisodes to build your foundation and better understand beer styles.
And before the next episode, I'd like to ask you to review the show and let us know what you'd like featured in upcoming episodes. Until next time, here's to you and your sense of beer style. Thank you for listening. Cheers.